Hello, citizens. Councillor Gian-Carlo Carra here, Ward 9 TV Light, and we're here to discuss the evolution of the secondary suite issue. And yesterday, December 11th, at Council, it was a pretty historic day in my 7-year Great Neighborhoods mission at City Hall because we finally significantly moved the ball further down the field. Back in my first couple of years on council, we were able to make some forward movement, and then we stalled out for several years. And now with a new council, with 4 new members, we were able to significantly move the ball forward. So what happened yesterday is we agreed in a 10-5 vote to direct administration to bring bylaw changes applying to the entire city, wherein in all R districts, which is basically R1, where secondary suites are not permitted in discretionary uses, to amend the land use bylaw so all of a sudden secondary suites become a discretionary use everywhere. So what that means is the secondary suites land use hearings, which have been taking up about 20% of council's time in session, are going to go away because you don't have to take that step. Discretionary use is a little bit of a compromise. So in the past, when you brought forward a land use application to City Hall, you would say, I'd like to convert my R1 property to R1S. What you got, if you emerged out the other side, and something like 85–90% of all secondary suites that were heard by council were approved, what you got was you got a permitted use for a secondary suite within the 4 walls of your existing home, or you got a discretionary use allowed for a cottage in your backyard or a carriage house, a suite above your garage. Now, the difference between a permitted use and a discretionary use is a permitted use you're allowed as long as you meet the building code, you're off to the races. A discretionary use means that you have to apply for a development permit. That development permit gets scrutinized by administration. It also gets weighed in on by the neighbors. And if you've got neighbors who are against it, they have the right to appeal to the Subdivision Development Appeal Board. Now, I was a little bit concerned that discretionary use was basically going to take, if you had a contentious suite that took an hour and a half of council's time, that it was going to translate into 6 hours of almost semi-formal court proceedings at the Subdivision Development Appeal Board. And if you had wealthy neighbors who wanted to lawyer up, you'd need to lawyer up, and it was going to be a nightmare. I was backed off of the ledge of fighting against discretionary use for 2 reasons. Number one, discretionary use is largely how secondary suites are legalized throughout most of Canada, and it has not resulted in an explosion of Subdivision Development Appeal Board hearings. And in the occasional time where it does once or twice, it becomes very clear that the political reasons why council overturns secondary suite hearings, there's so many neighbors who are against it, don't apply at Subdivision Development Appeal Board. What happens at Subdivision Development Appeal Board is they look at the technical merits of the case, and if you meet them, you're off to the races. So someone can spend money on a lawyer, but if they can't make the case. And so with those 2 things in mind, I was willing and able to go the discretionary use route because I don't think it's going to result in a ton of appeals. It's going to take an entire step out of the way so you don't have to come to City Hall. And it's also not actually going to amount to a lot of appeals, especially if the message gets out after the first 1 or 2, if there are a first 1 or 2, that it's not worth anyone's time or effort. So with that in mind, I went into council yesterday. Now the council, the notice of motion that triggered this was brought forward by Councillor Keating, and it basically had 3 clauses. The first one was create discretionary use throughout the city. The second one was establish a registry so that all legal secondary suites are part of a database that we can track. And number 3 was return to the era of charging fees for secondary suites. I did not put my name on that notice of motion because I was not in support of the 3rd clause. I supported the discretionary use, as you heard. The registry makes sense because we want to be able to track the data. And I think as time goes on and as the black market of secondary suites transitions into a white market, the registry is really how we sort of determine that. The final thing, though, is the fees. Now, when you're bringing a land use application forward, it's a $6,000 fee, and we were waiving that fee, and we were waiving the development permit fee. Council, unfortunately, voted to reinstate fees. So the age of coming in and getting a land use change, no longer necessary, development permit and a building permit fees waived are gone. You're now going to be on the hook for a development permit and a building permit. The good news is that that's less money. I was happy that council supported secondary suites, the discretionary and the 10-5 vote. I think everyone supported the registry, although there was definitely an attempt to turn the registry into a much more draconian and bureaucratic licensing group, and that was defeated, thankfully, and the fees were reinstated. And so, on the whole, very good job. There were a number of other notices of motion that were brought forward. I consistently voted against them, and a lot of them passed to just tell administration to think about a bunch of other things and bring us a bunch more things to consider. And I was against them because, A, I want to keep the regulation on this simple, and B, a lot of the concerns about secondary suites are not concerns about secondary suites. They're just concerns about bad landlords and bad tenants. And these are things that exist in secondary suites, in homes that are rented out, in rooming houses, in apartments, everywhere. And to really sort of pretend that secondary suites are the bugaboo is part of the problem. So I'm hoping that that message gets across to my colleagues when all of this comes back in March for final approval, and that we go forward with a discretionary use, with a licensing system, and moderate fees, although I'm hoping to be able to win that battle too. On the whole, a historic day for the YYC suite movement, and I'm looking forward to March when we actually enact all of this into law. Thank you so much, and talk to you soon.